Welcome one and all. It's time for another red hot, spicy, tingling, sizzling edition of Age of Sigmar Tournament Report. This time it's the Halloween Spooktacular that took place the weekend just past in Nottingham at the TSN Arena, the home of the Honest Wargamer. It's a 2,000 point tournament and a few little tweaks in the rules. The most notable thing is that the Kronspine is outlawed. So no Kronspine incarnate. It's deemed to ruin the game, and for this event, it's banned. Also banned are specific battle tome battle tactics. So only the battle tactics from the General's Handbook are permitted. So this is my first event using the Stormstrike Chariot. First event using the Relictor, Lord Relictor, who I've had since 1st edition, but I haven't used him since 1st edition, even though he's a mainstay in many people's competitive lists. So he is in there. Bastion is out from the previous events. I want to try something different, even though that list did very well. The last tournament I went to, I got 4 wins and only a single loss using that list with Bastion. The main changes from that one: Bastion out, Relictor, and the Chariot in, because the Chariot is just so cool. Look at the birds. In fact, once I saw this close-up image of the birds, I actually went back in with a detail brush and just fixed that tiny little bit of yellow that strayed onto the feathers there. You can see just above the beak. So that has been corrected after this picture was taken. So let's have a look at my list, shall we? By the way, this is my new microphone that just arrived. The old one broke, so this is the replacement. So if there are any issues with it, then let me know immediately and I'll rectify them, because occasionally when you attach a new microphone, things go haywire. So let me know if it could do with being louder or quieter or anything. Okay, so there's my list. And what I have taken is Astral Templars subfaction. So the reason for this, at the previous events I was thinking, what gave me trouble? And one thing that troubled me is when I would drop down the Annihilators or send Bastion into something. If it was a big monster, it would just immediately say, okay, for my monstrous action, I'm going to stomp on you, down goes an Annihilator, or I'm going to roar at you, and now you can't have all-out attack put on you, which was really cramping my style. So I thought, you know what, I'm not taking Bastion, don't need to be the Hammers of Sigmar this time, so I'm going to lose that ward save that they sometimes get, but I'm not going to have any monstrous rampages against me, which sounded pretty sweet. Although it does go against one thing that I've been arguing lately, which is it's kind of a feel-bad rule. It's a negative rule. It's saying that your opponent can't do something fun that's part of their army, rather than something that your army can do. So I'm not generally a big fan of those rules, but needs must. Okay, grand strategy, take what's theirs. Makes sense, because I'm going to have the Lord Relictor in there who can translocate my units, and I can zap down my units from the heavens. Should be fairly straightforward if the game's going well to accomplish take what's theirs, to have more of my units in the enemy's setup area. Holy commands, I'm able to have 2 because of my battalions, so I've gone for Thunderbolt Volley and Call for Aid, which is the same as I took previously. Call for Aid means I can just bring back some fresh Liberators, and that's made more powerful, I would argue, by translocation, because when a unit of Liberators is killed and you can bring one back, often what I would like to do in those situations is, if it's later in the game, I would like to immediately just drop them down onto an objective. But if I don't have a hero near that objective, I can't do that. But I can drop them down near the Lord Relictor if he's alive, and then after that translocate them onto the objective. So I think that is a good combo with translocation there, Call for Aid. Triumph Inspired. And my list is 1980 points, so I may get my Triumph a few times, we'll see. So for my leaders, we've got the Lord Imperatant with Arcane Tome and Starfall. No Master of Magic, so I've just given him Starfall to stop piling in. Depending which armies I come up against, that could be important. And in fact, it should be more prioritised than I tend to give it credit for, stopping piling in. I think after this event, I've learned a few things about piling in that I either wasn't aware of or I underestimated. So I think in future, this spell is going to get used more frequently, because there are times where I think, it's only just a big monster, I don't need to stop that piling in, but then actually there are shenanigans attached to piling in that you sometimes would like to stop. Then we've got the Lord Relictor, who is the General and High Priest with Translocation, so invoking the Prayer of Translocation on a 2+ rerollable. Surely can't fail. The Knight Incanter with Lightning Blast, the infinite range spell just to make up for her being a knight and short range on most of the spells. Just there to do an auto dispel per game, really. Then battle line, we've got 2 units of Liberators and Judicators. So those 3 units are in the Expert Conquerors Battalion, so they'll be worth 3 on objectives. Then in other units, we've got the Chariot, which is the spear version, not the bow version. Because why not? The bow version just doesn't look that appetizing. You want to get it into combat. Then we've got the Long Strike Raptors and 2 units of Annihilators with Grand Hammers. And then Concussors, who are kind of the weird selection in the list. It's just because of the models that I have available and I don't feel like chopping their heads off and replacing them with spear tips. So until I get some more Dracoths at some point, Concussors are a solid choice for me. And at least you don't have to get the charge with them for them to be effective. And the Annihilators and the Concussors are all part of Bounty Hunters, so we'll see if that comes into play. Okay, so my general plan, I'm going to stick with what's worked up to this point, minus Bastion. So it's going to be Annihilators dropping in, preferably in the first 2 turns if there's a good spot for them. If not, I can always wait till turn 2 and 3, but ideally as early as possible. And using the Long Strikes with Thunderbolt Volley and the Annihilators combined to bring something big down in turn 1 is the goal. It's usually what I'm looking for. So if that works, we're in business. Okay. Oh, I just remembered I haven't enlarged the arrow yet. So let me just bring up the thumbnail again and I'll just make this arrow big enough for you to see very well. Change mouse pointer size. Let's increase it from 3 to 8. There we go. So, first battle plan is the Mighty and the Cunning, which is fairly straightforward. So you've got the 4 objectives across the centre there. And one thing to be noted also, this tournament was not using the extra victory points for killing Galatian veterans or anything similar to that. So only the straightforward scoring down here. 1 victory point if you control 1, 1 for 2, 1 for more, and then 2 for the battle tactic, and 3 for the grand strategy. So very straightforward scenario this. And what am I up against? Well, I've got the list up here now. And this is Gloomspite Gits. There aren't that many actual goblins in there though. It is the Grim Scuttle tribes, which is very spidery, and the grand strategy is No Place for the Weak, which is that the... I don't remember which one that is now, but the Triumph is inspired, but I'm going to have my Triumph for this game because the total is above mine. So there is a Trog boss in there somewhere, and can't see it in this picture, but we'll get to it in a minute. That is the General, who is an Alpha Trog, and has a glowy howitz. There's a Fungoid Cave Shaman, called Freddy apparently, according to this. He has the Law of the Moon Clans, shall we say. The Hand of Gork. There's a Madcap Shaman, and that has Itchy Nuisance. There's also a Breaker Boss on Maya Brute Troggoth, which I think I can spot at the back there. And allies. So there are... Let's see, so I think, is that an ally? Yeah, so that's the allied unit. Then battle line. There are lots of trolls. So 6 Rockgut Troggoths, 2 lots of 6. So they're just behind the front line there. In front of them there are 3 Fellwater Troggoths, 2 units of those. There are 5 Spider Riders, which are over here. and 3 Ripper's Snarl Fangs, which I think are these wolves there. There's also a Marsh Crawler Slogoth, which is... can't see it at the moment, but it'll be in there. Then there is an Arachnarok, which is represented by this big hideous troll with a spider on its shoulder. That's starting off the table, along with one of the demons, I think. And Endless Spells, there's the Burning Head, and Mork's Mighty Mushroom. So there's the Mighty Mushroom there. And let's have a look at a closer look, shall we say, at the setup. So you can see there is the Trog boss at the back there, hiding, doesn't want to get shot. And this is the kind of thing I'm expecting to face. So not necessarily this list, but a bit of a castle, because when you can drop down Annihilators 7 inches away, people don't want to spread out. And I'm planning to give people a bit of a dilemma, because with the amount of stuff I have off the table, it's a big threat for you to go first and start moving and spreading out. And it's not always easy to maintain that castle when you start advancing. And most of the scenarios generally require you to move a bit. So you're going to have to leave something exposed when you start moving, usually, unless you've got just a vast number of models you can spread out across a very wide area. But there are issues with that as well. And if you go second, then you're giving me the opportunity to fire twice with the long strikes at something, and then hit it with Annihilators before you've moved. So you kind of do want to get on my army faster, but you also don't want to get on me because you're leaving spaces behind you. So that's the dilemma I'm trying to give people. That's my thought process. Because I'm often going to be facing this kind of block to prevent Annihilators from getting to the juicy stuff early on. And obviously you want to be bringing them down as early as possible. Get things dead. So this is what I've got on the table. I've got my Concussors, I've got the Relictor, the Long Strikes, the Imperatant. I've got the Long Strikes near the Relictor, because then they can be translocated away to safety if something comes closer. Got the Incanter there, got the Chariot, and some Liberators on this side who are just going to dip onto that objective. So I'm already thinking that this setup I really should have had, looking at the block. None of that stuff is really going to want to go out on its own too quickly. I could have easily had some more Liberators down there that could just get onto this objective as well. That's going to cost me a few points early on, but I thought I could do with some off the table. So I've got 2 units of Annihilators, the Adjudicators, and a unit of Liberators all off the table at this point. And I believe my opponent is getting me to go first, because I think I'm not going to get the choice, really, of going first or second very often in the first battle round, because I've got 11 drops. So that's fine though, because as I said, I'm trying to give my opponent a dilemma so that there's some negative to either choice. Ideally, I want my opponent to go first, because they're going to leave gaps for the Annihilators, but it's not a total disaster if I have to go first. So I pick against the odds, which is just a nice easy one, and the Liberators just get happily onto that. So obviously at this point thinking should have had more Liberators to get there, and they're not really going to be threatened because, like I said, it's a big block. And everything else is not going too crazily far forward, because obviously you can get doubled and they don't want to get charged, especially things like the Chariot. It's so fast, you don't need to have it up there, risk it getting hit, or it can do its thing. You can see there are wounds being dished out here, so I've done some serious long strike shooting onto the Trog. Is that the Maya Brute Trogoth there, with the dude riding on it? So wounds dished out there. I decided to drop my Adjudicators in on this flank, because I thought, you know what, I might be able to kill that unit of wolves there. And if I do, my opponent has a choice to make. Does he keep the coherency of this big block? Does he maybe shift the whole block this way to worry about some measly Adjudicators, which means they're not going for the objectives? Or do they ignore the Adjudicators and just allow me to shoot them, pepper them with shots for the whole game? That's my thinking. If I can draw units away, then that's going to start leaving gaps for the Annihilators to expose. Because I haven't brought any of them down yet by the looks of it, because there's nothing really juicy to hit. I don't really want to go in and just hit a unit of 3 trolls, because whenever I kill a unit of those trolls, on a 4+, on the next turn for the gits, a unit of trolls can come back at half strength, which rounds up apparently. So if I kill one of these units, then 2 of them could just, there's a 50% chance 2 of them are just going to come back. So they are definitely not a priority. If anything, I'm going to try and whittle them down to 1 model, so they're not a threat anymore. And that's definitely risky with the bigger unit of Troggoths there, because there's 6 of them. So if you whittle them down to 1, they're going to have some serious rally potential. So that's the plan there. Don't kill all the wolves though. Looks like I've done about half the wounds required on them. So this unit is purely trying to draw something away to create space. And I got 3 victory points for that. I hold an objective, but I don't hold 2. I do hold, let's see. I hold 1, and I hold more than my opponent. And I do not hold 2. So maybe I should have got 4. Yes, that might be a little mistake there. So I might, unless I'm missing something that someone else can point out, I think I should have got more than that. Anyway, so that looks like desecrate their lands that my opponent has chosen there, but it's a very blurry picture. So we've got the mushroom endless spell plopped down here, and that is going to potentially harm nearby units. The wolves are just being this way, staying out of the 3 inches, and some wounds are splashed onto the long strikes and the relictor, but not much from the mushroom, and this big beastie that's come down. So it's, I was thinking, I'm kind of glad this is out the sky now, or out of the, where do they even hide? The swamp. I'm glad this has come up from the snowy swamp already, because while it's up there, it's a threat, and it would mean I'd be kind of hesitant to leave certain things on their own. I have got some contingency for that with the relictor who can translocate units away, and it's obviously the long strikes I'd want to protect. But the fact that it's come down now, it wouldn't be too much of a detour for the concussors to go back and kill it. So I'm kind of pleased that it's come down now, because I'm not going to have to invest a lot to take it out. That was my thinking at the time. See if it actually plays out that way. So my opponent is able to get maximum points for that round by just touching these 2 objectives. You see, because I went first, I didn't want to move up and touch these 2, because you can get doubled, and I didn't want to be in range to get attacked by 1,000,000 trolls. So, the next battle round. And I'm going first, and I pick gaining momentum to kill an enemy unit, because I'm fairly confident I'm going to. That unit of wolves is almost dead, and I'm going to put a lot into this thing as well. So, there you go. The concussors do take it down, and they use their lightning blast or lightning breath of the Dracoths on the way in as well. If anyone's watching this live, by the way, let me know. You can see there are several people viewing at the moment, and there are some likes raining in on the video as well, which is good. The long strikes, they unleash some shooting, and I send the chariot into that front unit of trolls, 3 of them, because I'm thinking, you know what, I want to get stuck in on this bit now. I want to just make a big dent in the enemy lines. The chariot goes in there, and the annihilators come in behind here, into these Troggoths. Unfortunately, they only manage to kill 3, and then they are killed in retaliation, which is very sad. I would have liked more than that, but they did actually make their charge, which is nice when they came down. They've splashed a few wounds around and killed 3 trolls, which I don't think that's really a good trade. Because I look at the amount of points that those Troggoths cost, it's obscenely cheap. So I'm sure you to get the most out of the Troggoths, obviously, you need certain things around them that buff them up or allow them to come back and so on. But it's still very, very cheap, I feel, for those units. I think that's very, very strong for the amount that they cost. 6 of them are only 50 more points than 3 annihilators, which is not a significant amount. So one thing that was evident in this game is that when I'm looking at my Stormcast War Scrolls and I see, well, hits on 3s, wounds on 2s, or hits on 3s, wounds on 3s, yeah, that looks pretty good. But then I look at War Scrolls for opposing armies and I see, oh, it's like 3s and 4s, or 4s and 3s, and I think, oh, that doesn't look too great. But other armies tend to have a lot more units that buff up those kind of things. So in actuality, when you're being attacked, it ends up being, okay, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 2s. So, yeah, it's very easy to just rack up a lot of wounds with certain units, and this is definitely one of them. So, Annihilator's dead. Not a good trade. But what would have been a better unit to attack? The boss? Maybe. Okay, then, next, the Judicators do finish off those wolves, which is nice. And I've brought down some Liberators from the sky as well on this objective. So, I am currently holding, I believe I'm holding this one, and am I holding this one as well? Is the Chariot worth more than that troll? I do not remember. You can see the tail of someone who was in a T-Rex costume there, by the way, a big inflatable T-Rex costume at the gaming table. So that takes some dedication to Halloween. Anything else of note that's gone on in my turn here? Not much. So I did get maximum points, so I think I have got this own as well. So, on to the next turn for my opponent. Eye for an eye. Seems quite likely that my opponent will be able to kill a unit because the Chariot's out on its own. And there's all this stuff around it. Gets hit. You can see that one of the Troggoths has already rallied back. So I'm already regretting even bothering to attack them with the Annihilators. I should have just taken down the monsters or support pieces rather than the units, I'm thinking. Because they're just going to keep swelling in numbers, or just coming back at half strength later, whereas the other stuff can't. So I think that's a lesson to take here, in addition to losing out on those points early on by not getting into this area with them. The Chariot is dead, so battle tactic accomplished. And at this stage I'm thinking, I've killed a few things, but what have I actually gained from it? Not a whole lot, and I've already lost my Chariot and Annihilators, so I don't think it's been very good trades so far. My opponent is only able to get 4 points though, because these Liberators are worth a lot in there, so that one hasn't been claimed from me yet. So it's still very close. I go for barrage through enemy lines because I'm going to plop down units in my opponent's territory this turn, so I translocate the long strikes all the way into the far corner and bring down some Annihilators. So I'm just abandoning the centre because this is just a big mess of Troggoths and I'm not going to defeat them, especially while they're all standing together. So I'm just going to spread out onto the side objectives and into the corners with my shooting and just try and play the avoiding combat game, except when I want to murder something. So the Annihilators, let's see, did they actually manage to accomplish anything in that turn? Let me see who was over there before. So that thing was there. I think I may have shot that down. I think that's the... let's have a look what that's called again. That is the... That's not the Maya-Brute Troggoth. You know what, I can't even remember what that thing's called right now. But, needless to say, I don't think it's there in the next set of pictures. So, that's been killed. I feel like the Annihilators didn't make it into combat with anybody in that turn. I think they failed their charge. So, moving on. Onto... Yeah, so I got my barrage through enemy lines quite handily there. Now, the enemy is starting to spread out from the centre, which I'm quite happy with because they're not supporting each other. And it's slightly less threatening. But my Liberators had a go at killing those Spider Riders, but they're now going to face Trolls to the face. And these Annihilators who came down, and they may have hit something. don't think it was anything particularly important though. They may have just failed their charge and not attacked anything. So they've started to get magicked to death, so you can see models are dropping. And because none of my heroes are particularly amazing and fighty, I decided to put Fine Hour instead of Finest Hour on here, because it's just fine. It's a fine hour. It's an acceptable hour. Not a particularly great hour. Definitely not the finest. So we've got lots of Troggoths coming for the Imperatant, and oh no, he's dead. So yeah, the centre is getting cleared out. So my opponent is able to get against the odds, I think. Yep, got more objectives than me now. So it's not looking good, but I've still got some hard hitters left. We'll see what I can do. It's just a big wall of troll flesh that I'm going to struggle to break through. But I can shenanigan my way to more points, definitely. So there are the points at the end of that turn. So I'm a little bit behind, but it's not too one-sided at this stage. And gaining momentum. What was the battle tactic last time? Against the odds. Okay, so this time I think my opponent gets the next go. But I do rally an Annihilator, which is nice. But then they get killed again. And then they all get killed, except that one, and then that one dies as well. So, yeah. My opponent got the double. Did lots of slaughtering in that corner. Couldn't reach most of my units that are spread out, but doesn't really need to reach them all, and got maximum points. So, some of the Liberators that have come down here, I think this is the unit that was killed here. I then used Call to Aid to bring them back, surrounding the Relictor. And I've got another unit over there holding this objective, and the Judicators are still up. So they're a bit far away from the action now, the Judicators, for my liking. I'm going to pick Desecrate their lands, which is an easy one for me to accomplish. And the Relictor is backing away. And he translocates some Liberators over here. So I'm desecrating this building here to get the points. So I do get up to 4 because I'm holding these 2 objectives. So I'm just trying to score, racking up those points as we go. And that's how the points will end. Because there's no way I was going to kill any more units and clear them off objectives from that point on. As you could see, when I sent the Dracoths were killed by these Troggoths, I think. So all I could do really was get my battle tactic and score some points. So, let's see. Have I been underscoring myself here? Let's see. Should I have got 4 for this round? I hold 1. I hold 2. And I got my battle tactic. Sounds like a mistake. I may have made that mistake in the first round. Not 100% sure. Unless I just took a picture of that prematurely, because there's more stuff going on here. Let's see. What did I get? First crack at turn 5. Or 5. I think I may have just taken some surmising pictures at the end. But the Relictor ends up translocating himself onto this objective. Take that. Which gives me some more points. But the Troggoths are able to get quite a healthy number on here. And these Liberators, because they were the ones that were brought back with Call to Aid, so they're not considered expert conquerors anymore. They're not worth as much. So I think the Troggoths probably were able to get this. So it ended up being, if these are the final scores, my grand strategy is, I think if I'd got my grand strategy, hold on, let me see. Did I in fact get my grand strategy? No, I didn't, because there's too many enemy units that fell back to prevent me getting my grand strategy. Yeah, that's it. So I couldn't get it. And Yeah, because if I just translocated the Relictor in there and run another unit, it wouldn't matter, because I remember measuring, and I wouldn't have been able to get enough units in there to counter the enemy units that were just hanging back to prevent my grand strategy. So the final scores, let's see, so we've got 24 over there, and we have got 19 here, which is close, and I think maybe it should have been an extra point to me, unless I've made a mistake working it out. So maybe it should have been an extra point. But the way this tournament's scored, it's not just on wins and losses. It's kind of an old school 20-0 system. So the wider the margin of victory, the more points you get, or the less points you get if it's the margin for your loss. So that means that the result of that round was 12-8 against me. So a very, very small loss. High scoring game. And let's see if that trend continues. But I did take pictures of some of the armies that were laid out. This Gargant is missing its head, which I believe someone took away as a prank. Tee-hee-hee, indeed. There's some Cruel Boys, some Deepkin, some Seraphon, some Fire Slayers, which are some very, very interesting conversions and basing. Some more Stormcast with extremely fluorescent bases on some of the flying units. There's some Nighthaunt with the blackest of black paints. You've got some Ogres with Kragnos. And the next scenario. So it's the Prize of Galat. And this one, you've got the 5 objectives, like so, and they become active throughout the game. So I think whoever goes second picks one to become active, and in the first turn you have to pick one of the 3 in the centre. So you can't pick the other one in your own side, which would be too easy, of course. So I'm up against the Ogres with Kragnos, so it's the first time I've ever faced big old Kragster, and there's a lot of big stuff, which ordinarily would very much like to be monstrous rampaging me, but it's not going to get that opportunity because of the Astral Templar's subfaction ability. So let's have a look at this list, which I am loading up now. So it's the Boulderhead Moor Tribe. The Grand Strategy is no place for the weak. Triumph is bloodthirsty, and the Ogres will be getting their Triumph in this game because they are 1950 points, which is significantly below the amount, but I'm sure you can't get any cheap units in that army. So Kragnos is in there, obviously, 720 points. And when I think about the Troggoths at 290 for 6 of them, and then I see Kragnos at 720, he looks way, way too expensive, considering maybe in certain matchups he's not, but in this one, against me specifically, I think he is weaker than a unit of those Troggoths, to be honest. Because one unit of Annihilators coming down could very easily, feasibly kill him in one go. He's only got about 18 wounds, I think. So he's not good value in this matchup, I think. I don't have any monsters, which is when he thrives, so definitely not getting the most out of the Kragster here. There are other bonuses related to him, such as, I believe you can get extra charge distance or reroll your charges or something like that when you're within 12 of him. So these big Stonehorns. There's a Frostlord on Stonehorn, which is I think it's the one at the back there, the one with the plume of smoke coming out. That's the general. And there are 2 regular Stonehorns who are quite a bit cheaper, which are these 2. And then there are 2 Mournfang Gargant hackers. It all sounds very anti-monster, this list, and I ain't got no monsters, so too bad. So I've got the Chariot on the table, Dracoths, fairly standard. By the way, the one thing that was clarified in the updates for Stormcast is the Imperatant. He can zap down from the heavens and then use his 7-inch ability for Thunderstrike units on that same turn that he came down. He doesn't have to have been previously on the table. So I do have the option of putting him in the sky and still using his ability, but at the moment I don't feel the need for that. So I'm starting to bunch up things as a habit around the Relictor for translocation purposes. And got the Knight Incanter on the table. I don't think there's any spellcasting coming at me, so she's really just there for those D3 mortal wounds she's going to dish out per turn unless she fails the casting roll. And look at Craggy there. Look at his funny little face. The old Cragster. So, off the table. It's fairly standard off-the-table layout. Annihilators, Liberators, Judicators. Judicators, they don't have any hindrance to coming down from the sky. You could just drop them down immediately and shoot. It's not like they would find it difficult to charge because they're not going to. And Liberators is just handy to drop them down onto objectives later. And you can only translocate one unit a turn, obviously, so I don't want to rely on doing that with everything. So, the first go. I think, yeah, my opponent gave me the first go, which, considering there are no screens, is a bit of a risky move, because there's a chance I can just take down Craggy immediately. So the long strikes are going to have the Thunderbolt volley into the Cragster. The Annihilators are going to land right in front of him and then charge him. The Judicators are going to land over there and try and shoot down the Mournfangs, because there's only two of them. So even if I kill one Mournfang charging into Judicators, I don't think you would like that with the Unleash Hell potential. So I think this is a decent move for them. So let's see what happens. Look at that, 10 wounds on Kragnos from the Mortals, from them landing, and the long strike shooting. But that's it. The Annihilators fail their rerollable 7-inch charge. Wow, 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 wow. So, we've got Craggy heavily wounded, and he doesn't have great facility for getting his wounds back. So that's nice. And this was the active objective. So I brought down some Liberators from the sky onto it, I think. As far away from the enemy as possible. I just want to score some points, because I made the mistake in the last game of not maximising my scoring, and then considering how close the game was at the end. Because one thing that's worth noting, if you're within 1 point, I think, at this event, then it's considered a draw. So the unique scoring. Annihilators, disappointing in the first turn, but we've still got Kragnos heavily wounded. 4 points. And that was, I chose the Desecrate Their Lands battle tactic, and I wanted it to be this piece here, because the Judicators were going to land there, so it's a nice easy one. And it still leaves me with some of the objective scoring ones for later on, when more objectives are active. So, my opponent chooses gaining momentum, pick an enemy unit, and then control more objectives. Obviously going to be the Annihilators that just sat right in the middle of the table. And yeah, they get eaten. So I don't know if I had any command points to try and redeploy them. I'm assuming I didn't. Because a lot of my... Without Bastion, the Imperatant gets a free command point, but obviously he has to be in range to do it. And I can generate command points on my heroes, but it's nice to have that Bastion one that just has no range on it. So occasionally you will run out of universal command points that can just be used on a unit that's gone out on their own. So all the big juicy stuff coming this way, the Mournfang heading over to the Judicators. So Annihilators get eaten. Judicators, they do not all get eaten, and they wound the Mournfang as well. So I've lost 1.5 Judicators. So at the end of that turn, see they're spreading out onto murdering and getting towards objectives, but only this one's active at the moment. So 4 points. Oh no, because let me see. Let's see, how did they get 4 points? Oh yeah, because that guy got in there. Can't even see him. So there's 2 there. Which one's the leader? The leader is the one with the smoke plume, which is that one, I think. One at the back. Let's see. No, it's not. That one is the leader, and that's the one that got into these Liberators and murdered them and stole the objective off me. That's how I was able to get 4 points. So, my next turn, I go eye for an eye, because I'm definitely going to kill Craggy this time. Surely. And I lost a unit. So the Judicators, managed to shoot down that last Mournfang, which is nice. But there's only 2 of them left now. I think actually they may have wounded it with shooting, and then maybe it ate one of them, or 1.5, or 2, and then they finished it off in combat, possibly, because obviously they've lost some models. The chariot goes into the Stonehorn in the middle there. The Dracoths are coming up, and Annihilators come in behind Kragnos to murder him. They get him up to 17 out of 18 wounds. Chariot takes some wounds back in this combat. I'm really enjoying not having to face monstrous rampages here. But look at that. Kragnos smacks down all the Annihilators, and then they explode and kill him. So he suffers his last wound from an exploding Annihilator. So Kragnos is dead. And all the Annihilators are now dead as well. However, I only got 2 points for that round. I got my battle tactic, but I did not want to go near any of these active objectives. So, I think it's on that one, and I think that one has become active now. But obviously I've got no one on it to take it. So, I didn't want to get any of these units unnecessarily close. Got the chariot locked in combat here, which is fine, because this thing's not going to be able to charge something else. And I'm liking my defensive setup I've got here. I've also got options to translocate units later on if the enemies start closing in on me. There's still a lot of threat left even with the Kragster down. We've got rid of Kragnos and the Mournfangs, and we've lost 2 lots of Annihilators. So I think that's a very good trade. Even just using the Annihilators and Kragnos is a good trade. I think 3 units of them to take him down is still a good trade. Okay, so next turn for my opponent. This one's mine, so the general is going to try and kill the chariot, which seems quite doable. And yes, it's dead. This one is moving back. This objective is active and is moving towards those Judicators by the looks of things. And there is a score of 5, so that's the maximum, because as I said, I'm just sitting back and trying to kill things, and then I'll try and do my scoring a bit later on the objectives. I'll just try and get battle tactics and stay in it until a few of these things are dead. If I just go out there now, they're going to get munched. So my opponent gets the double and goes next, which could be fatal, and chooses to desecrate my land here. Gets the 2. This one's the general. It's the Frostlord on Stonehorn. There's a regular Stonehorn. And the Judicator up there on its own. The Stonehorn charges in to the Dracoths, but they unleash hell and kill it. So that was the one that was already wounded from its fight with the chariot. So they finish it off with their unleash hell, which is wonderful. So I think they both hit, and they did 5 wounds between them with the mortal wounds on unleash hell, which is amazing. So that's dead. And the general. Let's see. So did I redeploy? I think I redeployed the Liberators away from it to get them a bit further, which caused it to fail its charge. And then this one up here, that one, comes steaming in then and takes out a Dracoth. So we've kept this guy out of combat for a turn, which is amazing. We've killed one, which is amazing. And all the enemy threat is now here. These 2 things. So I can start translocating people around onto objectives now. That's the plan anyway. So my opponent does score maximum again, but I'm thinking it'll be the last time that happens. So I could even get a double now. So I pick against the odds, which is a nice easy one. And I translocate the long strikes onto this objective. And if you see this symbol on one of them, it means it's the proving grounds for this turn. So I think I already owned it. And 3 6s. What was that for? Let's see. Okay, yeah, I think I translocated them and then they shot down the Stonehorn and got 3 6s, which did a lot of mortal wounds, so it died. So they were translocated here. I've got that objective. I've got this one. There's a Liberator in there. And I think the Imperator is touching it as well, and it's the Proving Ground at the moment. And this one isn't active. So these 3 are active. I think my opponent still holds this one though. I think his units were in there last when it was active. So I do need to take it, but I have got maximum points for the round. And I get the double. So there's only 1 enemy unit left, and I've got the double. Barge through enemy lines. I'm going to pick this time because I'm going to keep him there and translocate a single Liberator up here to hold this objective. I get my battle tactic, and the Liberator is hiding behind this big garrisonable piece of terrain. The Imperator did suicidally try to kill this, but failed to kill the Frost Lord. And so it's just looking very healthy, lots of units to score with. I can teleport maximum points. So let's see what my opponent can do against the odds. Just wants to hold this one and kills the Dracoth and holds it. And still holds just that one. He's in there, and then on the next turn tries to chase down my Lord Relictor. And because this one is the Proving Grounds, the Relictor is just able to run away and not worry about this area being taken. So my opponent, who did get the double on 4 and 5, I think, scored 3 and then a 2. So couldn't get a battle tactic in that round. I think was able to just hold that. Maybe. I don't entirely remember now. Oh, okay, so Knight Incanter. Previous turn, she failed her spell on a double 1, 2 wounds to herself. This round, she failed her spell again, twice in a row with a double 1, and then did 3 wounds on herself, so she's dead. No one attacked her during the whole game, she just killed herself. Hilarious. The Relictor gets eaten going in there, but all I needed to do was just score some points. 3 in the last round, 3 for the grand strategy, and there you go, it's a win. Not a massive win, but it's a win. So the score in that one was 11-9 to me on tournament points, as it was obviously very close. So I'm realising at the moment that my list is very good at scoring, because I've got shenanigans, I can teleport around, and I've got things like Call for Aid, where I can get nice scoring units into play again. But I'm also not able to stop my opponent scoring a lot of points yet. Because I assume that's going to be because I don't have a lot of bodies, don't have a lot of screening units, and there's a lot of things I don't want to be going near. So, round 3. The Nidus Paths. So this is the battle plan where you can teleport between opposite corners, like so, and like so. And it's this weird territory that everyone hates marking out on the table. Very annoying, and I wish they wouldn't do it. And the scoring, there's 4 objectives there. 1 if you control 1, 1 if you control 2, 1 if you control more, 2 for the battle tactic, and 3 for the grand strategy at the end. So very straightforward, just weird teleporting abilities. And I'm up against the big lads, Sons of Behemat. So let's have a look at the list. Okay, so there is a Beast Smasher, who is the general, which is this one here. Actually, that's not the general. General is this one, I think. There's King Brod, which is this one here. So King Brod is 580 points, which is significant. So that means if it takes me 2 lots of Annihilators to bring him down, still very much worth it. They're getting value for themselves by doing that. There's a War Stomper as well, which I can't remember which is the War Stomper out of these two and which is the Beast Smasher. Either way. And then there are 3 Man Crushers as well, which are not inexpensive on their own. So it's for the full 2,000 points, this list. Very straightforward, just lots of big stuff. So what do? I put the long strikes within shooting range of King Brod, because I've got my eye on King Brod. I want to take him down in turn 1. So I'm going to Thunderbolt volley him, I'm going to shoot him, I'm going to send Annihilators after him, and I've also got a wild idea, which you'll see in a moment. So I've got the Chariot on the table, I've got the Dracoths, I've got everyone really far back in the corner, because I don't want the enemy teleporting from the opposite corner down here, and I also just don't want to be near them, because they'll eat me. So I've got a lot off the table here. I've got 5 units, which is the full amount, all my Liberators, because if I kill a couple of Gargants, then they're going to struggle to cover objectives, so I can just drop down into the areas that they don't want me to be in, because they can't reach me. So I'm going first against the odds. Picking a unit from your starting army, so just the easy one. I think I just picked the Dracoths, put them in there. You'll notice the Chariot's gone, because here's my plan. Translocate the Chariot over there. And is it a great plan? So the one flaw in this plan is that the Chariot isn't going to have the ability to spend command points on itself, because I don't believe it has elite. I don't think it's elite, so you have to have a hero within range to, for example, reroll charges. But that's only like a backup part of the plan anyway. Shoot some wounds onto the king with the long strikes, and then the Annihilators have dropped down. Slapped a couple of mortal wounds on him, I think. He's been Mystic Shielded, which isn't going to help him against most of what's coming, because there's going to be a lot of mortals on him if I get my way. And drop the Chariot down, so I've got that to charge in as well, which I'll hope can make it and do some mortals as well. But even if it doesn't, he's going to be in no position to attack the Chariot, because he'll be hit by a million Annihilator hammer shots to the face. And then surely, even if he eats all of them, he's going to be diminished by then. That's my thinking. Okay, 5 points in the first turn, because I was able to spread onto objectives. However, you will notice the Annihilators never made it into combat. That's because, again, they failed their 7-inch rerollable turn 1 charge. So that's 2 games in a row. And it's a bit of a trend of me not having particularly successful first turns so far. And the Chariot didn't make it in either, which would have also been nice, would have put more wounds on him and got that nice bonus for the charge. As soon as the Annihilators didn't make it, I was thinking, this Chariot's kind of just sitting out there, not too happy about this, because there's another Gargant over there that could potentially attack the Annihilators. So, King Brod goes after the Chariot while hiding from the long strikes, and eats it. The other Gargant decides not to go after the Annihilators, because they're quite far away in the middle on their own. They're not that much of a threat. And it can also hang around here in case it wants to teleport later. And it's currently scoring on that objective. So, my opponent gets the maximum and starts to advance a bit with the double. So King Brod's coming in. The Man Crushers are coming in. These two are just holding on the objectives. The Knight Encounter is about to get eaten by King Brod, which I allowed to happen because she's not for much use in this game, to be honest. Okay, then King Brod. So, this is one of those games where not only do I learn a lot of weird, ridiculous things about piling in, but occasionally, this is the way the Age of Sigmar rule system works, and the way different units do vastly different things from each other that aren't really referenced in the core rules, is that you'll have a lot of situations where you'll set up logically within the game rules, thinking, okay, this is going to prevent, my action A is going to prevent consequence X from happening. With the positioning of a unit, you're thinking nothing can get in here, or nothing can get round there, nothing can reach this model, nothing can get past this. However, then you have a game where your opponent has a lot of, well, actually, because of this rule, because this thing is closest, I can actually do this. Or because that gap is this size, that means I can just slide in here and now move to the other side of this and so on. So there was a lot of that in this game. A lot of things where I felt like things were safe, but actually they weren't. So it's a good learning experience, but if you were experiencing that constantly, then I can imagine it would get frustrating. So that happened a lot in this game. A lot of times where I underestimated, particularly piling in. Things like, if you charge, you can pile in even if the unit you were fighting died already. I just didn't know it was a thing until this event, but I'm going to keep that in mind in future. And my opponent is able to get maximum points for that round. So, King Brod, you can see, destroyed the terrain piece. And you'll notice there are some Annihilators there, who aren't in combat with him. What do you think happened there? Yep, more Annihilators came down, going after Brod, and failed their charge again. So the Concussors had to go into him. Over here, the Annihilators that were alive are going after this Gargant and hoping for the double, so they can do something juicy there. And the Long Strikes put some shooting on him. More like King Jerk, yes. King Brod is a King Jerk. I've got my Judicators plopped down over there onto an objective, so they're not going to be under much threat for the whole game, because look how far away everything is. So these are lots of wounds that have been dished out onto King Brod. I think those are King Brod's wounds. And this guy, I ran towards him, so he just takes some shooting damage for now. And I get 3 points because I'm holding that objective. I think that's it. Next turn. So I do get the double, and I choose barrage through enemy lines because it's going to be easy. And I do manage to kill off Brod in this turn, but it's quite late to be doing it now, and I've had to use multiple turns of Annihilators failing their charges to do it. So he's dead now and his head's fallen off. But it's not glued on, so don't worry. And I've got some Liberators in here as well. Scoring. Got some Liberators down here for scoring. Because obviously they're worth 3 each, but I think he's worth a lot unless you knock his wounds down. So I think I shot enough wounds off him and hit him with the Annihilators, but didn't kill him. The Annihilators did not kill him, which is really sad. So he's alive, and I did knock him down enough, so I hold this objective though. So I'm going to get some nice points for it. So it's looking fairly good at the moment. If we'd taken that guy down, it would be looking amazing right now. There would only be 2 enemy units left, and I would be on 3 objectives miles away from them. Daniel says, I hate accidentally placing slow-moving units too far away. I'm the master at tactical oops. Well, the problem with Annihilators is when they come down, they've only got a very slow move. If they fail their charge, they're stuck in no man's land if people run away from them. This unit, though, I'm not as concerned because I've moved the Lord Relictor to within 12 inches of them, so they're wholly within 12, so on my next turn I'll be able to translocate them somewhere more useful. So, got my battle tactic. My opponent chooses against the odds, which is a very easy one for this Gargant to get, and the Man Crushers are heading over here, so I redeploy the Liberators 6 inches, which is great, get them really far away. And they throw a rock, I think, at the Concussor. Something like that. This one, who's taken quite a few wounds, gets into combat with the Liberators and the Imperatant and kills all of them. So, yeah, it was one of those where you're not fully aware of all the rules something has before they all get used on you. So it was something like, okay, and then on a 2 I do this, and on a 2 I do this, and on a 2 I do this, and all your models are dead. And now I do combat. So it was a situation like that, where things were dying and I wasn't entirely sure what was going on. But I think it's this special, it's the new version of the stuff in the pants, basically, where you pick up a model, and instead of putting it in your pants, you can throw it at a unit. Daniel says, I assume you know your tactics way better than I do. Never had the chance to play AOS. Have any painted lot of the minis? Well, if you'd never played it, I would be very disappointed if I didn't have superior tactics to you. But after you've had a few games, who knows? But they're all dead, which is sad. And my opponent's able to get 4 points because I'm holding a lot of objectives. Failed to accomplish everything you wanted. And look at this, I rally back a concussor, which is amazing. However, I did get doubled there. So the Man Crushers do make it into these Liberators. And the Relictor is just about alive though, which is very handy. The Long Strikes are dead. This guy, I feel like this guy should be long dead by now. I've had so much going after him, but he's just swept through this area. So it's not looking that great at the moment actually, because this guy's heavily wounded, but I still need to commit to taking him down. This guy's not been touched. These guys have barely been touched. So 5 points for my opponent there. And obviously I'm enjoying not being monstrous rampaged at all in this game, which is great. Okay, so I went eye for an eye, thinking I'm bound to kill something. I translocated the Annihilators over there. And I was kind of running out of objectives that I could accomplish, I think, at this point. And I thought, you know what, that guy's so wounded I could just shoot him down. But I couldn't even finish him off with shooting, and the Annihilators, of course, failed a rerollable 9-inch charge. If they're not going to succeed with a rerollable 7, of course they're going to fail a rerollable 9. And he lived, so I failed my battle tactic, and he 1 point. So at that stage, it's essentially game over. But let's see. The Man Crushers and the Concussor. So I think when the final Concussor is killed off, he explodes and takes one of the Man Crushers with him, so there's only one left. And I think I got first crack at turn 5. And I only got 2 points for it though. And this guy is coming over here to try and take this objective. Annihilators are just sitting out there. And okay, so I am going to get my grand strategy by about 3mm, because I've got these 2 units, because the Relictor translocated himself into the opposite corner of the table for safety. So I need to have more units in the enemy's territory. This guy needs to be wholly within his own territory to stop me taking it. However, the border of the territory goes about 3mm over his base. So that means I get my grand strategy. So it's a nice 3 points there. My opponent does not get the grand strategy. It means it's only a very small loss. And considering I'm having such disastrous charges with all my Annihilators so far, then I can't be too disappointed with being very closely contesting a loss. Not that disappointed, because it's been pretty woeful dice so far. You'd expect to pass a lot more rerollable 7-inch charges than you fail. And it's been the opposite way so far, and it's such a crucial part of my entire game plan as well. Especially against Gargants, where you need to be killing one a turn, really. And I think I would have had a decent chance, but they just can't make it into combat. Okay, let's have a look at what the final score was in that round 3. So, let's see, that was an 11-9 win for my opponent, so very, very narrow. All my games have been incredibly tight so far, barely any points in it, but high scoring games as well, so lots of points being scored, but very, very close. The next round, Silk Steel Nest. So by the way, one final point on this game. I was really sad that the first time I faced Sons of Behemat, I didn't have Bastion to throw 40 dice at the enemy in the hero phase, with no range, no visibility, because that would just be funny. Okay, Silk Steel Nests. This is a one where you can burn objectives on your opponent's half of the table from turn 2, but they also might hurt nearby units when they get burned, which everyone always forgets to do, in my experience. But you can burn them to get extra points. But if you start burning them too early, then you might not be holding as many objectives for scoring regular points with. So you have to decide carefully when to burn, and if it's wise to do so at all. So, there's the layout of terrain, and we're up against let me just crack open the enemy list here. Up against the Fire Slayers. So this is the heavily converted list. And the first thing to point out is that the Magmadroth is not a Magmadroth, and most things that are not Magmadroths are in fact Magmadroths. So the Magmadroth there, and this thing over here, those are both allied Stormstrike chariots. So allied Stormcast units. The Magmadroths are these three. Wait, that's not one. These two, and that one there that's off the table. So one of them is the High King, who has Blood of the Berserker, Axe of Grungni, Coldheart Ancient. I think that's the really expensive guy. There is... let's see here. Yeah, that's 360 points for that one. That's the general as well. There's a Rune Master and a Forge dude. It doesn't actually tell me the name of the unit on here. Yeah, because it lets people edit the unit nicknames and it takes away their actual name sometimes, which is very handy, of course. So, the Rune Master has Volatile Anvil and the Heal rare. And the Forge dude has the Prayer of Ash. So, battle line, there are these two units here. And on here, it says, Oath Keepers with Runic Shields. Okay. And these two Magmadroths are your more standard 320 point Magmas. So it's still very tasty. And then there are the two Stormstrike chariots allied in. Okay. So it's 1990 points, which means I get my Triumph. And what am I thinking here? Well, obviously, it's widely spread out, this whole scenario, which generally favours me because I want to drop into gaps, but there are no gaps left open at the moment, except to the chariots. So if I want to attack the chariots or the battle line units, then I can. But not the big stuff that I would like to just take away before it kills me. So Annihilators and one unit of Liberators off the table, because I want things on the table to hold all the objectives from the start. And put the long strikes within range so they can immediately Thunderbolt volley against this thing as well. And also within range of the Relictor. So, that guy's off the table, so he can come down 9 inches away, which I'm not worried about. Should I be worried? Maybe, but not particularly. So my opponent elects to go first, I think. Oh no, elects to let me go first, does he? Let's double check. No, my opponent goes first and picks against the odds with this unit, so they're going to get their battle tactic, and decides we'll advance a bit, and we'll also bring down this big beefy Magmadroth right in front of you, 9 inches away from the long strikes. And apparently it's got a +1 to its charge, so should still probably fail more often than not. But obviously it does not fail. And, okay, here's more piling in weirdness. You think that Relictor looks safe there. Logically, in a war game, you think the unit that you attack, that's who you're attacking. But yeah, you can't really think like that in this game. And if I thought this thing was a threat, and considered that it would make its charge, I could have just had Liberators screening this whole area out so they couldn't get anywhere near. However, because it's able to charge the long strikes, it can then swing round when it piles in and punch the Relictor in the face and possibly cause game over immediately. Let's find out. So it does kill the Relictor, it doesn't kill the long strikes. Okay, it's bad news because I want mobility in this scenario, but we will have to live with it. So this guy is a sitting duck there, we're going to be able to kill him. So 4 points scored. I pick against the odds for the Knight Incantor to just sit on this objective. And you can see that the concussors and all the shooting was enough to bring down that magma. So the magma's gone. The Relictor's gone. Relictor, he's obviously not worth as many points as the magma, so you could look at it as a good trade, but the Relictor is quite critical. He's a critical element of this army. And that one magma I'm not sure is. So 2 Annihilators came down over there, killed the chariot, and lost 1 in return. These Liberators have just moved away as far as they can from the enemy chariot while holding this objective, and I've just repositioned a bit so that I could get maximum murder and spreading out onto objectives. So, good job, Annihilators, you've killed the chariot. Should I have focused on killing this unit instead because they're better for scoring? Maybe, and I would have got bonus damage. So 4 points. Next round. So this is now the proving ground, and I think it's my turn. So I picked it as a proving ground because only a chariot is coming this way. And the one thing about picking a proving ground you have to watch for, though, is it does open up one of the battle tactics that your opponent scores if they kick one of your Galatian veteran units off the proving grounds. So you do have to be careful with that. So desecrate their lands is chosen, and this terrain piece was hanging into my territory, so it counts. I think that's it's a really weird battle tactic, because you're not desecrating their lands if it's only partly within their territory. If it's a castle and one of the bricks is hanging into my land, and you are desecrating that one brick, so you come round and just graffiti onto that brick that's in my territory. I don't understand why that makes your battle more successful in any way. It's just weird. I'm not really a fan of it, to be honest, as you might have guessed. I use it because it's there and it's easy to achieve, but I don't think it makes much sense. So there's an endless spell here, which is bad news. And it does some wounds. And I think I rallied a long strike back, but then one of them was killed anyway by the endless spell. So this guy, I think this might be the powerful, all-powerful general magma, comes forward. I think he's got about an 11-inch charge in there. I think he's got +1 to charge, so a 10-inch. The Annihilators are going to get attacked in a moment. And of course he makes the ridiculously long charge, the kind of charge I've been failing all day. Wow, wow, wow. So magmas are making nice above average charges, showing Annihilators how you roll 2 dice. And it's into combat. So, see what happens. This chariot gets into these Liberators. And the Dracoths are dead. Long strikes are kind of alive for now. 2 dead Liberators. And the long strikes are dead as well. So, it's not looking good here. Because my opponent, who had this turn, I think I might have given up this turn. Was this turn 2? Yeah, I think I might have given up first go at turn 2. Because look how far away everything is. That just looks safe to me. This guy, though, got all the way to here, and then made a ridiculously long charge into combat. Made me horribly regret giving away the turn. Was it still the right choice? Would it have paid off more times than not? I don't know. But it's now looking bad. So what we're going to do, got 1 Liberator left alive, because I think another one flees from Battle Shock. So there's just 1. So we're going to start shooting up this guy, putting millions of wounds on him shortly. So my opponent gets 6 by burning an objective, which is that one. But you'll see he's already gone as we get into my turn, because I just shot him down with the Judicators. So we're getting rid of units. You can actually see here that those 2 Annihilators were able to completely obliterate the unit that was there, which is nice, because there were, let's see, let's go back. So there's all those guys there against 2 Annihilators. And then the next time we see a picture of that area, there's 2 Annihilators and nobody else. Let's see. Is that the same 2 Annihilators or is it different ones? I'm sure they killed the other Annihilators. That must be a different unit, mustn't it? Let's see, it's the grey-haired one. Let's go back and have a look. Because that must be a different unit. That would make no sense. Yes, so this is the original unit that was killed, and I brought the fresh Annihilators down to kill that unit and claim that area. They actually made a charge for a change and killed them. And they've lost 1 though. And they're in a decent spot now because we're on an enemy objective, because we've got one of ours burnt on our side. The Liberator is just avoiding this magma because this is the proving ground, so I'm still scoring it. So I just don't want to fight it. And then the Judicators just start hanging off their arrows. And I'm able to score some points. 5, so still right in the game. Turn 3, so I get the double. And I get the Annihilators into this wizard, this priest of some description, and annihilate him. And they gain momentum by pick an enemy unit and kill it, which I chose that one. The Annihilators didn't move towards him because he would have just redeployed and made their charge more difficult. They just stood there and then charged. And the Liberator just continues hiding from this guy. And the Judicators were lined up to shoot him, to put wounds on him before the Annihilators finished him off. So, not a lot of stuff left in my army. And also, you'll notice the Liberators there. That's because I actually forgot to put them on the table during this turn, but thankfully it wasn't going to impact anything in the actual turn, so my opponent was quite happy for me to just remember, oh yeah, you were going to bring them down. They were only going to be plopped down here and weren't going to interact with any other units, because all their goal is to be there and then burn this objective later. So that's generally my rule with letting people go back and do things that they've forgotten. If it's something that didn't impact anything else during the turn, then why not just let them do it? If it would have affected decision making or would have affected how effective certain things were in positions, then obviously you can't wind back and change all that. But if it's something that's just self-contained like that, then that's fine. My opinion. Even in a tournament. So my opponent chooses gaining momentum to kill this one final Liberator, which if that is a fail, that would be hilarious. And this endless spell is chipping away at my Judicators. The Imperatant is getting extra command points, which aren't much use to him, but not much else he can do. Daniel says, fun fact, I have a Magma Droth in bits somewhere. Very tricky model to assemble without the instructions. I lost it immediately. I'm sure you could get the instructions from someone if you ask on Facebook or something. There must be a Fire Slayers Facebook group you could ask in. So, Endless Spell. It's a wall that you can't pass through unless you're a Magma Droth. So the Annihilators are blocked from getting to this one. Because what I wanted to do was burn that objective. Because that's a threat. The enemy can actually reach that one. This one is much safer. The Liberators don't have to burn that now. They will probably get a chance to burn it later. And you'll see the magmas are spreading out a bit. So that's actually a chariot. This actual the one Magma Droth on the table is actually a chariot. And this is a Magma Droth. So this one is heading back to where it's needed. As this area is gone, this area is about to be gone. And I don't have much protecting anywhere really. I just don't have that much stuff left. So you can see I've got Liberators here. That's because the final Liberator is killed over there. So I bring back a fresh unit of 5 within 12 of the Knight Encounter here with my call for aid. And that means that this area is going to be burned now. Get 6 points. And my opponent then goes again with barge through enemy lines, which is going to be difficult to fail. and moves in, does a bit of shooting, or the endless spell moves, should I say. This guy comes in, kills the Liberators. So I think the Liberators got shot down by the other magma from over there, which means it's now a longer charge for the magma to reach the Liberators than it was to reach the Judicators. And all he wanted to do was reach the Judicators and then do the weird nonsensical piling in where you swing round in a totally different direction and land on that. I say nonsensical just because logically, if you're looking at the game as an outsider, piling in, you assume the original intent of the rule is to just get you closer to attack the unit that you want to fight. But obviously, it's a game, and there are various ways you can act within those rules to squeeze the most out of it. And you can get a lot of advantages by piling in certain ways and making sure certain units are closer than others and so on. So because of that, he actually fails the charge into the Liberators, which is quite comical because I now still own this. Okay, here's a thing that happened as well. So we had to ask the TO about this one because we know what the rule was, but we also were playing it wrong for a whole turn. So, in this situation, the Liberators had come back to life. It was a new unit with call for aid. So, I'd positioned them so that there were only 2 of them touching this, because we were under the impression that they were still expert conquerors when they come back at the time. However, they're not. So we were playing it as if they were. So, my opponent did not score this, because as we were playing it as if they were expert conquerors and discussing it, then we were working out how many I needed to have touching it. So the TO basically decreed that, okay, because you were playing it that way, it was that way for that turn, but from this point on, then they're now only worth 1 on the objective. That means if you want to keep that objective, you'll have to move more of them onto it. Otherwise, it's going to be taken off you. Or you'll have to have more than your opponent, because really they should have taken it. So at the end of the turn, unless you have more on it, then they will take it off you. Which I think was the fairest way to do it, unless you like wind back the whole game, or wind back a full turn, and then establish how much they're actually worth. So it's one of those times where it's useful that you are having that dialogue with your opponent on the intent of things. Because that way, if you do get something wrong, then you know what you were trying to do and you can kind of figure out what things should be. The main time that normally happens in games is where you declare how far away from something you are and your opponent agrees with you. So that then when a model gets nudged later and suddenly they're in range, you can say, well, we agreed that they weren't in range. So then there wouldn't be a charge, for example. So it's always good to have that ongoing dialogue during the game with your opponent. Sometimes it kind of gives away what your intent is, but for clarity purposes, then I think it's important to do that. If you want to be sneaky, then you do risk that if someone knocks into the table and a model moves half an inch, then suddenly you can get attacked because you didn't declare what you were doing because you were trying to be sneaky. So it's a risk you have to take. Okay, so that's the one that shot down the Judicators, which meant this guy failed the charge, which cost some points. So only 4 points that turn, the Fire Slayers. And barge through enemy lines is what I've gone with this time. So, the Annihilators are coming this way. Let's see, Daniel says, absolutely, clarity and communication makes for fairer and more enjoyable competition. Yes, that is correct. So these Liberators can burn this objective, if they wish. The Annihilators wanted to reach this one to burn it. However, because that wall's there, they don't have enough space with the run move to get to the middle. And because they are moving, and they're within 9 inches of the unit here, I think, what kind of unit are they? I think they're Volcanic Berserkers. So they were able to redeploy, and they rolled a 6. I think they rolled a 5 or a 6, which was high enough, and they ended up being able to get onto this objective and deprive me from keeping it, which is obviously annoying. Let's see, how far away were they? Yes, they're all the way back here, so they needed a good 5 or 6 inches to reach that. So the Annihilators pay the price for moving, which is another thing to be wary of in this game. Anytime you're ending a move within 9 inches of a unit. If it's just outside an objective, for example, and you move near it, you're giving them the opportunity to dive onto it. And it's another one of those things, the redeploy rule. Obviously, the intent of creating that rule is to move away from something that's coming towards you. But that's not how it has to be used. You can actually use it to move closer. You can move sideways. Whatever's beneficial to you to get onto an objective. So I'm not going to hold that one this turn. So 4 points scored. So it's still very close. Still right in this. The next turn, I have a turn, and the Annihilators don't move because then they would redeploy and get more guys in here. So here's my plan. See, so these guys are going to stretch out, get 2 of them touching this area without coming within 9 of the Berserkers. They're going to have 1 guy leaning back, touching this area, touching the centre, so they can burn it at the end of the turn. The Annihilators are then going to charge the Berserkers, kill enough of them so that me having 2 Liberators here and the Annihilators is going to be enough to take this objective and get me more points. That's the plan. So I stretch out the Liberators, and then look at this. The Annihilators roll 3 on the charge. 4-inch charge, and they roll a 3. And I don't think I've got any command points left because, as I was saying earlier, the Lord Relictor got killed, so I can't teleport anyone. And the Lord Imperatant is the one generating all my extra points, and he's all the way back here. So, wow. I've also set up to try and stop any piling in onto my objective here that they can then burn at the end of the turn. So that's the intent here. We'll see if that is actually doable. So Annihilator's failing charges is the theme of this event. So I've burnt that objective now to get an extra point. And it's still not going to be enough probably. And okay, so here's another case of I was believing the rule was one way and it was actually another. So I thought the purpose of this circle in the middle was that you have to be touching that circle in order to burn the middle objective. So I'd set up in a very specific way to prevent anyone from touching it, unless they killed all the Liberators with the first round of attacks. And wow, apparently that's not the case. Apparently you can just be within an inch of the circle, or within an inch of the centre point. So that circle, I don't know what it's for exactly. Is it just supposed to be a dot? Is that how it's supposed to be? I don't know, somebody tell me. So what I end up doing, I think when there was some movement, I think I redeployed, or when I piled in or redeployed, I'm not sure, I put someone directly on top of the circle. And then the Berserkers went first, because there was a battle tactic that was used to try and kill one of my battle line, or one of my Galatian veterans with one of their Galatian veterans. And they failed to do that, but obviously these other units did finish off the Liberators. And they are able to burn the objective. And we both got our grand strategies. And I mean, I think they burned the objective anyway. Because they didn't do their battle tactic. And they scored 4, so they must have done. So I think we just didn't bother taking it off because it had all the models on it. So my grand strategy was to have more in the enemy's territory, which I did. And my opponent's grand strategy was... let's see. It was also the same. So we both got our grand strategies, which was take what's theirs. So the final score there, you can see my opponent got the 24-27 and I got 124 by my count there. So another incredibly close game. Perilously close. Really high scoring, really close. None of my games so far have been a blowout either way, which is great. You want close games. Going into the final round. And this one is close to the chest. So, it's another one of those weird deployment areas no one likes drawing out, but at least it's not got too much of a weird jaggedness to it. So this is the one where you have to pick an alpha objective. And there's your territory, but you have to be 9 inches from the enemy territory, so really your setup area is kind of like that. It's kind of a weird... like that. Which they could just draw in there. I don't know why they don't do that. Weird choice. Anyway, I could probably do a 3-hour video ranting about these maps. I'm sure I could do a 3-hour one ranting about Mortal Wounds. So here's something to point out so far. In all my games up to this point, I feel like I'm not making that many armor saves. A lot of the wounds I'm taking are just mortals. So, for example, against the Fire Slayers, lots of the wounds I was taking are things like when I punch you in the face, or when my unit punches the enemy unit in the face, they then reflect back mortal wounds on me, or they have a... What do they have that's mortal wounds? I think the endless... It's not... I keep calling it an endless spell. It's actually an invocation, isn't it? It's from a priest. So I think they were doing mortal wounds. In previous games, we had mortal wounds from Gargants. Like, it's the end of combat, so I get to do mortal wounds. And yeah, there's just lots of mortal wounds flying around. And then when I wasn't suffering mortal wounds, it was like, well, this Magma Droth hasn't fired this last turn, so now it's Rend 3, which is obviously really good against my army. So I'm not taking that many armor saves. And the ones I am taking, I'm not rolling very well, actually. I think I failed a lot of 4+ armor saves at this event. So, speaking of mortal wounds, Cruel Boys are next on the menu. And they are all about mortal wounds. 2 mortal wounds on 6s, 3 mortal wounds on 6s if they're near a certain thing, or they have a certain upgrade applied to them by the guy nearby. Just mortal wounds, left, right and centre, non-stop mortal wounds. All-out defence is usually pointless because they're either mortal wounding you or they're doing nothing. So, they've also got the, let's see, subfaction Grinning Blades. So, I can't see their units unless they're within 12 inches. I have to go near them to attack them, and if I go near them, they shoot me with all their mortal wounds. Sounds nasty. Let's see if I can accomplish something here. So I'm just going to have to try and shenanigan my way to a result. Move around, try and stay away from as much of the shooting as possible. Don't get hit. Try and strike in like lightning, kill something, and yeah, that's that. So, the most dangerous thing, as I was looking down the list that I spotted, or that I think is going to be a danger based on what my opponent described, is this guy. So that's Gobsprak. So, spells, got Nasty Hex, but also has the ability to cast Ravnak's Gnashing Jaws Endless Spell, which is only 60 points, but from my experience it's extremely potent. So, that guy, he's going to be a threat because he's very fast as well. Then we've got a Breaker Boss on Maya Brute Troggoth, which is only 180 points. That sounds cheap for how well I've seen that thing do. Snatcher Boss and Sludge Raker Beast is 290 points though, which sounds more reasonable. And that has the Arcane Tome and Sneaky Miasma, which I think it lets you move in the hero phase. That's correct. There are 2 Swampcaller Shamans with Pot Grots, with Nasty Hex and Choking Mist. There are some Gut Rippers, 2 units of Gut Rippers. There are some Hobgrot Slitters, just a bit of a screen. There is a Beast Skewer Killbow. I was horrified to learn that no one had ever referred to the Killbow as Killbow Baggins before. So hopefully that becomes a thing. Hashtag Killbow Baggins. And there are 2 units of Manskewer Bolt Boys. And they are, I think there's about 6 models in each. And there's the Gnashing Jaws Endless Spell. And I will get my triumph because this list is 1990 points. So the grand strategy is WAG, and I have no idea what that does. Anyway, so here's my setup. Making sure I'm not getting shot immediately. And I've got a devilish plan, but I'll tell you why it's not that devilish. Well, we'll get to the less devilish parts of it. I want to kill Gobsprak immediately. He's a big threat, he can fly, and I just want to kill him. So I'm going to send Annihilators after him, of course, but I also want the long strikes to shoot him, but they have to be within 12 inches to do so. So I'm going to, if I get first turn, I'm going to translocate the long strikes within 12 of Gobsprak, shoot him, drop the Annihilators down, and then kill him, and probably put some attacks onto these guys as well, because I could kill quite a few of them. The Gut Rippers, because they're going to be a threat as well. So that's the plan. I'm also going to have the Lord Imperatant over here to use his extra command points as well, for things like all-out attack. Because he has a lot of my command points on him. So he's in the heavens at the moment, so he's going to plop himself down. So the mistake of this strategy is that, knowing full well that as soon as I shoot something, it means I'm within 12. That means the enemy are probably going to be able to attack me next turn and then kill the unit. So I should have really deployed the Lord Imperatant on the table, like maybe here, and then just moved him into range and... oh, that doesn't make sense. No, deploy him as far forward as I can here, so that the long strikes are within 12 of him and within 12 of there. So the Lord Imperatant there can then, when they get translocated here, he can then issue the holy command of Thunderbolt Volley, so they can shoot this thing in the hero phase. Then, depending on how much damage I do, I can decide where to allocate shots, and then the Annihilators will come down and just mop up everything. Kill everything. So that's how it sounds to me. Daniel says, move in, plonk magic dude, run. Basically, I'm going to plonk things down, kill Gobsprak, and then face the consequences. But I think he's the most dangerous thing because he's got speed. Everything else is fairly slow, which means it'll be easier for me to avoid it, which is what I want to do, because I just don't want to engage, especially while it's all together with its buffs. Once they start coming out into the middle, I can land behind them and then directly attack the buffing unit, which is what I want to do. So I've got Imperatant, Annihilators, and Judicators off the table. I've got my Chariot all the way over here, because it's not going to be threatened by anything and it can dive onto that objective if need be. I've got Liberators here, Liberators here. So they're holding objectives and they can be translocated later. The Dracoth is just holding the centre in case anything comes in through here. Okay. So there's my opponent's army. Everything is in a fairly safe position. I'm not going to be able to land near it because there's a kill bow behind there, so I'm not going to be able to land here. I'd like to attack that thing as well with Annihilators, but at the moment, not going to be able to do that. So these are the only guys that are out on their own, so I'm going to be able to attack him. Okay, so I choose, because I'm so confident that I'm going to be able to utterly obliterate this guy with long strikes and Annihilators. I don't see how it can fail, so I'm just going to pick gaining momentum, pick that unit, I'm going to kill it, and then I'll have more objectives than my opponent, because I'll just move on to them. So, translocate the long strikes, Lord Imperatant comes down here. It's not really necessary for him to come down that close, but whatever. So I shoot loads of wounds onto the Gobsprak. I then, when the Annihilators get in, because he's already so wounded, then I decide, you know what, 2 of them will attack Gobsprak to finish him off, and 1 of them will hit the Cruel Boys' Gut Rippers? Yeah, Gut Rippers. So you can see, most of them have been killed by 1 Annihilator. Then Gobsprak takes 1 billion more wounds, but the Annihilators don't actually roll that amazingly, and he makes a lot of 6+ ward saves, using some Zinch dice. Makes a lot of ward saves, kills all the Annihilators, who then explode on him when he's down to his final wound, and then he rolls more 6+ ward saves. So, he survives, and I fail my battle tactic, and the Annihilators are dead, and I haven't killed anything. So again, turn 1 disaster, which that one wasn't just down to luck though, that was just me choosing that not all the Annihilators needed to attack Gobsprak, because that was more than enough to kill him. So if I'd just decided, you know what, it's my battle tactic, I should just throw everything into him and ignore the Cruel Boys unit there. Just throw everything at him, it's the battle tactic, need to kill him, prioritise it, take absolutely any doubt away. There's no way he could roll 1 billion 6s. Instead he just had to roll a few 6s to survive instead of 1 billion. So I gave him the opportunity to live by taking the risk of going big or going home. At the moment, it looks like going home is reigning supreme. But it didn't work. Another disaster for turn 1. And so another thing that's important here is that I have put these guys in range of the shooty boys there. So I would not like to get shot by them. But fortunately, that looks like it's going to be the case. That's a double bad. So I could have positioned them, I think, maybe out of range and still been within 12 of him. Maybe, but I'm not sure if the gut rippers were preventing me from dropping down here or translocating there. Because I had to be within 12 of him, so it was really tricky to find a space, and was just prioritising taking him down. But really, this part was wholly unnecessary, because the Annihilators could have just killed him on their own. Easily. If all of them had directed their attacks into him, he would have died. With the amount of wounds that they did. The one that killed the gut rippers. He killed... How many wounds did he do? Because there's 10 in the unit. And he killed 8, so he did 14 wounds by the looks of it. The maximum you can do. Or is there only 8 in a unit? Let's see. Is there 8 in a unit of gut rippers? If there's 8, that would make more sense. 2, 4, 6. Is it 8? If it's 8, then he would have killed 6, which is 12 wounds, which makes sense for the number of wounds an Annihilator can do. I think. Let's see. So the Annihilators, they've got 3 attacks, and they can do 3 damage each. Yeah, so he could do 9 wounds. So, yeah, I'm not sure, but all his attacks succeeded anyway, and there's 2 left. That's all you need to know. And then the others didn't kill Gobsprak. So it's not going well, failed the first battle tactic. And also, that's an easy battle tactic to do as well, that one, gaining momentum, and that's been wasted now. So one of the easy battle tactics is now in the drain. So, opposing turn 1. Gobsprak is on 1/1 wound, and he decides that he's going to fly away. Now, I'm not entirely sure that he can actually make it far enough to land here. I'm not sure he can fit far enough in there to land beyond the killbow, but the killbow could have just moved anyway. So it's mostly irrelevant. But he's flown away, old Gobsprak. And against the odds was played here for an easy battle tactic. Imperatant is gunned down horribly with mortal wounds, and the long strikes redeployed away to avoid being shot when these guys moved closer, which is a nice bonus, so they're not dead. So 4 points for my opponent, and my opponent gets the double. Wants to desecrate my land with this terrain piece. And so the previous turn I think I stopped an endless spell with the auto dispel of the Knight Incanter. This turn, however, Gobsprak leaps out of here. He's only got an 8-inch move at the moment, and he goes from here to out here to do his endless spell. And then he jumps back in again once he's done it, because he can move in the hero phase. And then he casts the endless spell, which comes down here and kills all the long strikes. So afterwards, I wasn't sure on the range of it. I wasn't sure on whether it should have been within range to reach that far with the roll, because I wasn't sure how far he could physically have got with only having an 8-inch move. I wasn't even 100% whether he could have made it beyond this building, which doesn't allow him to fit there, so he had to be here. I don't know if that's more than 8 inches. But I was measuring it afterwards to try and double check, and going by the photos to try and look. But things had been moved by then, so I don't think it was really doable to figure out exactly how far it was. But the endless spell gets in there, eats the long strikes by being within an inch of them, so they're all dead. And the fact that Gobsprak survived on 1 wound has now killed the long strikes, effectively. And 5 points for my opponent, and on to the next turn. So, the endless spell comically fails to kill the Knight Incanter, after I comically failed to dispel it. And I went eye for an eye, but didn't kill a unit, because I couldn't kill the killbow with the Judicators, and the Annihilators, who have to be 9 inches away now, because the Imperatant's dead, failed their charge with a reroll, because they're Annihilators. And I think they probably would have failed if it was 7 anyway. Although I think on this instance, I think I rolled 8 twice for the charge, which would have been enough if the Imperator hadn't needlessly gotten himself killed earlier. So Gobsprak is now very safe, because I have to be within 12 inches to hurt him, and he's miles away. And I can't drop down near him because there are units. So it's a very bad situation. So the Annihilators have wasted their lives, the Imperator wasted his life, the Long Strikes have wasted their lives, and haven't killed anything as a result. So turn 3 for the Cruel Boys. The Endless Spell comically fails to kill the Igniting Cancer again, after I again comically failed to dispel it. I keep making the Relictor a dispel bro, but he keeps rolling below the casting value, so he doesn't unbind it. The Annihilators that failed their charge are obviously shot to pieces. And the Killbow, I think it missed on the Incanter, and then the Gut Ripper went into her. But my opponent does not have the Expert Conquerors, so has not taken this objective off me. So only scores 2, because the battle tactic was... Did I say it was eye for an eye? I know that's the one... That's the one I went for and failed to kill anything, and then my opponent went for... I don't recall, but failed it anyway. I only got 2 points. So the Incanter is dead now. The Endless Spell finally eats her. And it's now going to have its eyes on the Lord Relictor. So you can see that I've got Liberators in here. I've got my Chariot over there. All these Gut Rippers and Bolt Boys have moved into the middle. But I've got some Liberators down behind there, as far away as possible. And my Concussors plop down in the corner because there was enough space for them to be translocated in there. They use their Lightning Breath to try and kill... I've removed his name from my memory out of trauma, Gobsprak. But they didn't kill him because they obviously missed, because it's Dracoth's Breath, and it only hits once for comedy effect with that Unleash Hell on the Magmadroth earlier, but usually misses. So he's still alive on 1 wound, but he keeps failing to do Heroic Recovery because he's only got really abysmal bravery. He's still on 1 wound. So I get some points in that round, so not looking too unhealthy. And he does ultimately die. So I think... Let's see, what actually killed him? I think I must have had another go the next round and finished him off. Let's see. Well, he is dead now anyway. Unless one of them actually hit him, and I've just been slandering the Dracoths for no reason. It's possible that one of them hit him and did the final wound. So he is dead now. So, these Cruel Boys keep failing to rally, but they do get some extra ones now. Come in to take this objective. I redeploy the Relictor to get away from them. And the Bolt Boys murder the Dracoths, who failed their charge of 9 inches in the previous turn, because I haven't been able to make any charges at this event. And these Gut Rippers are going after my Liberators, but my Liberators are worth more because I'm Expert Conquerors and they're not. They're going to have to come and kill me. So Dracoths are dead. The Sludge Raker gets into the Judicators. And... hold on. There we go. So my opponent does score 5 in this round, having first crack at round 4. And it's not looking good. I've got the Chariot, I've got some Liberators up there. I've got some here. I've got the Relictor. So I've been throwing a lot of units away and only got the Gobsprak dead to show for it, who should have been dead instantly as soon as the game started. But it took me 3 turns to kill him, and I had to use half my army to do it, and they all died. So that decision of not putting all the attacks into him because I felt it was a guaranteed kill, it's not paid off. So next round, I choose against the odds, which is a nice easy one to get me some points. And I do score some points in that round. So not looking too unhealthy at this point. I don't accomplish much, but I just move on to objectives. Then my opponent picks gaining momentum and wants to kill this unit. And look at that, they get eaten. And now holds more points than me. So does get 4. Hold on. Let's see. Gaining momentum. This unit is destroyed during this turn. You control more objectives than your opponent. So it looks like... Is there a Liberator still alive in there? No, that's accomplished because then I brought another unit down there. I think. Okay, no. Okay, here's what happened. So, my opponent... Wait a minute. Must have got the battle tactic to get 4 points, so they're dead. Why is it not 5? So I'm holding that one and that one. Holding another one? Don't know. Very strange. Trying to work out why 4 points. That could be a mistake. I think it might actually go up to 5 points in a minute. So I think it was 5. I think for the final picture that does change into a 5 actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah, that should have been 5. So I've got my chariot just dancing around here. I'm going to try and get my grand strategy by translocating the relictor into enemy territory. Chariot's just staying safe. So I get 4. There we go, it's a 5. So for the final turn, neither of us get our grand strategy because we don't have more units in the opposing area, but I did get my battle tactic, which was barge through enemy lines, so the relictor was in there for that purpose. So I've got my battle tactic in the final turn to get 4 points. So, final score is 20 against 19. And as I stated earlier, at this tournament, a difference of 1 point means it's a draw. So the game is a draw. We weren't really aware of that because we hadn't actually looked that deeply at the tournament pack, but we were informed that it was a draw shortly after the game. So there we go, ends with a draw, and there was barely any points between the two sides in any of my games at this event. That particular game, it was just mortal wound central. Everything was just being obliterated by mortal wounds. As soon as it went near the enemy, dead. So what I'm learning is, don't go near the enemy at all. Go in, strike with overkill if you need to. Don't spread your attacks around, just focus on a target, take it out with a favourable trade. Lose the unit that went in, but be happy about it. Don't try and get greedy and also chip away at a different unit nearby, is what I'm learning. Just kill the thing that you went for, basically. So a draw, acceptable. Considering how abysmal turn 1 was, I think getting a draw out of that is actually pretty good. Can't argue with that. So my list seems to be really good at scoring points. I can do lots of teleporty shenanigans. However, it's also really bad at stopping the enemy scoring points. And in this instance, I don't think I had much of a way to stop them, because if I go near them to contest objectives that they're on, I get bolt boyed to pieces. So I'd be interested to hear any tactical advice anyone has for the Stormcast, or any of my opponents, in fact, after watching those games. Because obviously they were all so nightmarishly close that both sides could obviously use a little bit of advice on how to destroy and obliterate their opponents rather than be in such a tight game. So let me know if you've got any tactical tips or hints. And I'm going to look at the final standings, because there are multiple ways you can look at this. So if it's ranked purely on win-loss record, then I finished 10th out of 12, but this tournament was actually scored on battle points, really, because it was the whole 20-0 system. And I scored 48-7 battle points, which put me about 8th, I think. Let's see, how many people had less battle points than me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe even 7th out of 12, which would be very reasonable indeed. So, the events that take place at the TSN Arena, there were a few new players there, but mostly it's hardcore veterans that go to the events there, I'm noticing. So, I can't really be disappointed with having 5 razor-close games like that. Especially considering, usually I had horrendous luck in turn 1 in every game, mostly, and some questionable choices in turn 1 as well. So, in the one game that I outright won, what was successful in that game that wasn't in the other games? So that was against Kragnos. So I think the number one thing there is that it didn't matter that I had an abysmal turn 1, because the thing I was trying to kill, it's still a good trade even if you end up using multiple units of Annihilators on it, which is Kragnos. So I think that was the main difference. In other games, the thing I was trying to kill in round 1, it's not a good trade if you have to throw away half your army to kill it. So when I was having the bad luck in round 1 of almost every game, then it can be quite punishing when the thing you were trying to kill is barely even worth it. So maybe in those situations where the enemy doesn't have a mega monster or a mega unit that I want to kill, maybe I should play the Annihilators differently and not try and just kill the biggest thing available. Maybe that's something to take from this. The Chariot survived Game 5, so I'm happy with that. And one notable thing about this tournament is that the favourite opponent voting, apparently I was 1 point off from winning that. So that's something to be proud of, isn't it? So it was so close that I did get an honourable mention in the favourite opponent awards, but 1 point off winning. And I think that's a decent achievement actually, because I believe, let's have a look at the records, the person who won favourite opponent lost all 5 games, which is usually what you expect because people typically have a better time when their army is performing better and they're doing well, generally. So if you lose a lot, you expect to get votes. So the fact that I lost 3 games, I'd expect to get some votes just from losing. So I think I did really well actually to get within 1 point of getting the best opponent. Would have been nice. The best army award, the coolest army award, went to the Fire Slayers that I played against with those wild conversions, which is fair because it's obviously a very cool army. I think the one I voted for was the Gargants that I did play against as well, because I like Gargant armies and there were some really interesting models in there, and they're just cool. So anything else to take away from this before I wrap up this video? Okay, thoughts on the list. I think this list archetype that I've been playing is fine. I think it's a decent list. The concussors are obviously suboptimal. You don't need to tell me that. I'm fully aware of that. I'm only taking them because they're the models I have. I think they look cool and I don't want to chop their hammers off. They could be subbed out. I'm not sure they're pulling their weight entirely. And when I look at something like the Chariot, that's considerably less points than them and has the same number of wounds and is faster and doesn't diminish when you do 6 wounds to it like the concussors do. They suddenly lose a model and half their attacks. They can both dish out a lot of mortal wounds. So I'm not sure the concussors are justifying their place in the list if we're being hypercritical of them. What could I put in instead? Also, I'd say the Knight Incanter maybe is struggling to stay in this list. Now that I've got the Relictor with Translocate and the Lord Imperatant who can have Arcane Tome and do Dispelling, does the Knight Incanter justify her inclusion in the list purely to dispel 1 spell per game automatically and then splash out D3 mortal wounds onto a unit that's far away, or Mystic Shield? Is it worth it keeping her in there in this specific list? I'm not entirely sure. If she dropped out and the concussors dropped out, that would allow more points to either put Bastion back in, which would mean switching back to Hammers of Sigmar, which would mean that I'm getting Monstrous Rampaged again, but I would also get my ward saves back, which is nice. What else do I actually own? I've got Prosecutors, I've got Ether Wings, that are good. I've got some units that have dropped significantly in points, actually. I've got Yndrasta, who people aren't that keen on still, despite the points drop. I've got Praetors, who at their lower points cost suddenly look half decent and could act as bodyguards for the Lord Imperator, perhaps. That's an option. They could come in to replace the Knight Incantor. That's something that could be worth testing out now that they've dropped in points. Not 100% sold on that idea, but it's out there. What else have I got? I've got... Who else have I got that dropped in points? I don't think I've got anyone else painted that actually dropped in points, but I have got the models available. I'm also going to be painting Krondis at some point soon, who came down 50 points, which makes it kind of appetizing. I've obviously got the Stardrake. I'm hoping that takes a bit of a drop in points in the next General's Handbook, which is only about a month away, I think. That would be nice. So I would like to run a Stardrake. I think it's a really cool model, one of my favourites. And I just don't think I can justify it at the moment. But to fit in specifically with this list, what do we think would be a good idea? Do we think Prosecutors to absorb some Unleash Hell would be nice? Do we think Ether Wings? Do we think bringing Bastion back in place of the Concussors and the Knight Incantor? I could possibly fit Bastion and Ether Wings in there in place of the Concussors and the Knight Incantor. That would be really interesting. Having Bastion and the ability to translocate would be kind of fun. That might be something I try regardless of whether it's at a tournament. I might just try it out in a game and see how I go on without the Knight Incantor. The spell of choice on the Lord Imperator, Starfall, I barely used it in this event. I probably should have done because it would have stopped certain shenanigans from happening. Although quite often it's on the opposing turn that the piling in that's really annoying happens. So it wouldn't help against that. And there weren't a lot of times where he was in a good spot to use it against a unit that I wanted to stop piling in. But there are times when it would be useful, but there may be something I can use every game more optimally. Also Prosecutors, yes, as Daniel says. So let me know what you think would be worth trying out. On my potential shopping list next, I have been eyeing up the Gardas Steel Soul because I've been missing having ward saves. And that would be one way to get some of them. That would be an interesting thing to try out. Other than that, don't forget to like this video if you're watching. Don't forget to subscribe, obviously. Check out all the links in the description. I've got a Facebook group, Discord server for the Andy and Rem show, which is coming back as soon as Rem is finished with his current international music tour with his band, the Fun Loving Criminals. Then we're going to be back with the show. And probably late November, and we're hoping to get back on it every week. And we'll actually have a lot to talk about because I've been playing a lot of games, been playing tournaments, and I'm going to get Rem to play more games because he's freed up some of his time because he's made some changes to his career, which I'm sure he'll tell you all about on the show when he comes back. And I'm going to get more games in, starting about December time. So look forward to that. It's going to be very exciting times ahead for Age of Sigmar content on this channel. In terms of other game systems, I've got a Kings of War event coming up on Sunday, which I've got one model left to paint for, where I'm taking my Night Stalkers again. It's the last game before the new book rules come in at tournaments, so I've got one last chance to use the Night Stalker filth. I haven't got any Dead Zone events lined up at the moment, but I'm keeping my eyes peeled. And what's on the painting table apart from that one model for the Night Stalker army? I've got my other Shadow Hulk, which has been there for a while. I've got my Ironclad for my Caradron Overlords, which has been sitting here for a long time, and every now and then I just do an extra bit on it, so it's getting there very slowly. But it will get done eventually. It's just a very large, intimidating model that's going to take a lot of effort to get it over the finish line. I've got Krondis, who is fully assembled now, so I'm sure I'll get on that at some point. And just other bits here and there, just loads of other models that I want to work on at some point. Some more Night Stalkers for Kings of War. And it's always just tempting to buy more as well, isn't it? Because things jump ahead in the queue because you'll play a game and you think, actually, this is what I need rather than that right now. So I'll just buy that, make that jump the queue, and then I'll get back to that other thing. And then it gets pushed further and further down the queue until eventually you get to it. So that's the plan. Work through all the painting, get more games in, win games. And I can't be disappointed with this event, despite not winning that many games. Having 5 razor-close games is always fun, and can't argue with fun, can you? So with that, don't forget to check out the links. As I said, if you want to keep this channel afloat during these dark, foggy, turbulent times, then why not pledge all your life savings to my Patreon? That would obviously be appreciated and allow more juicy, spicy, red-hot, succulent, tender, moist, finger-licking good content to flow into your YouTube content taste buds. And I think everyone's a winner in that case, aren't they? Let's be real about this. With that, let's have one last look at this beautifully photoshopped thumbnail. Look at that glow. Look at that beautiful Griffhound. It's not even a Griffhound, is it? It's like Mega Griffhound. Are they actual Griff chargers pulling the chariot? Anyway, on that note, all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are. Didn't I do well getting through the whole video without going on a 30-minute rant against mortal wounds?